happening even in areas where parda was practiced. Certain parts of Uttar Pradesh, certain parts of Madhya Pradesh, and large parts of Bengal presidency, which practice parda, parents did not have any problem sending their daughters to, boys' school. They might be still practicing child marriage, marrying of girls at 14 or 15, but until then, they were ready to send their daughters to boys' school. So now, how much did this idea, opinion differentiate, between the Scottish and English opinion? Now, two worldviews, that is regarding Bengal famine, 1769 to 1770. There was massive famine in Bengal. Historians have estimated anywhere between 2 to 8 million people died, depending on which history book you read. 2 to 8 million people died in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Solution number one is given by Cornwallis, Governor General. That was creation of zamindari, large landholders, that is permanent settlement. Solution number two, given by Charles Grant, a Scottish commoner, he says educate Bengal peasants. They will be able to take care of themselves. Educated peasants would be skilled to make the most of soils and seasons, to improve the existing modes of culture, of pasturage, of rearing cattle, of defense against excesses of droughts and of rain, and thus to ameliorate the quality of the produce of the country. So let's go to the first personality I'm discussing today, Thomas Munro. Thomas Munro's father, Alexander Munro, was a small trader in Glasgow. He had borrowed heavily and invested independence by American colonies in 1776 led to complete ruin, complete bankruptcy. The family faced grinding and humiliating poverty. Father faced the threat of imprisonment from his creditors. As a result, all the three sons joined the army. So the people who were joining the army, there was hardly any example of people accumulating large sums of money, wealth, and going back to Scotland. They were the businessmen. It was businessmen who were making money, not the soldiers. So historian Bryant says that soldiers' chance of making fortune were non-existent. Whereas they ran a risk of early death from disease, only economic desperation can explain their enlistment. So salary of Bengal army was higher than the Madras army, and most of the Scots were sent to Madras army. So most of the English came to the Bengal army. In the 18th century, a soldier's pay was 10 rupees without accommodation. And the working conditions were also equally bad. And Munro wrote to his sister, I walked from sunrise to sunset without any refreshment other than water. I have traversed on foot in different directions almost every part of the country between Vishakhapatnam and Madura, a distance of 800 miles. I used cartridge pouch as a pillow, my coat as a blanket, and slept in tents. He would pitch a tent outside a village and sleep there rather than paying the rent to somebody to stay in a proper accommodation. Thomas and Alexander in India, Daniel in Jamaica put food on the table in Glasgow. The situation was that desperate. He had to save money to marry off their sister, and all the three brothers had to save money to marry off their sisters. Munro became fluent in Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada languages, interacted very closely with the local population, so he was transferred from the army to civil administration because of his linguistic skills. Richard Wellesley ordered the permanent settlement should be implemented in Madras Presidency. Bombay did not exist at that point of time. Bombay Presidency came under the British in 1880. Munro, as a collector, a 28-year-old young collector, questioned and fought against it. And also, we have to understand, why these people were fighting. And the desperation at home. If he had lost the job, there would have been a bigger consequence for his family living in Glasgow. But nonetheless, they took chance. And it was not just Monroe. There are many people who did this, and Monroe. I have researched well. That is why I'm bringing out this personality ahead. So he lived in tents pitched outside villages for months, conducting survey in 40 degrees Celsius. For someone coming from Scotland, staying in a collector's bungalow, by this time he had become a collector, and he could have lived in a big bungalow, and then just implementing permanent settlement would have been the easiest thing. He said, no, I will not implement. And a group of Scottish officers together, they bond together and then decided to implement something different. Arthur Wellesley reminded him in 1799, you are not popular among senior officials. So Monroe stood up not only to Cornwallis, to Richard Wellesley, to Gilbert Manto, Francis Hastings. These are four of the most powerful governor generals. India had 44 governor generals, viceroys, governor generals together, 44, 45 people. I mean, if we leave Mountbatten, 44 people we have. Of them, the few of them were very powerful and few of them were all right. But these were four most powerful governor generals, and he stood up to all of them. Monroe opposed, in the letters that he writes to the government, his seniors, he says, he opposed the arrogance of officers who passed the laws without knowing how it affected the people of India. We forget that one great principle, the freedom of people from which they derive their influence, does not exist here. Monroe suggested to the higher authorities respect traditional institutions of Indians. All regulations should, in the beginning, conform as nearly as possible to the existing customs of the country and be changed progressively with those customs. So he was also one of the first officers who declared that the British rule in India is temporary. He suggested to the higher authorities the British rule in India should be in India until the natives shall frame a regular government for themselves, and to conduct and preserve it. Whenever such time shall arrive, it will probably best for both countries that British control over India should be gradually withdrawn. This is 1820s, and the Scottish officers are talking about independent India. To exclude natives, in the same letter he says, to exclude natives from higher administrative position is both politically and morally wrong. We must treat the natives with courtesy. We must place the confidence in them. We must render their official situation respectable. Now, he was appointed as governor of Madras after 40 years of service, and he was governor for 7 years. And when he was appointed as a governor of Madras, H.T. Prinsep wrote to him saying that in the Hindu tradition, only Brahmins have access to education and employment, and only Brahmins should be appointed to government positions. Monroe says, I have lived in this place for 40 years and I know village by village information. No such thing exists. So he ordered a survey because Prinsep did not agree. He ordered a survey of indigenous schools, and that survey was conducted between 1822 to 1823. And this survey became a model for further surveys in all other parts of India. And I'll come to the survey that was conducted in Uttar Pradesh. I'll just come to it in a minute. So the meticulous data of 11,691 schools from 5 linguistic regions, that is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, and Odia, very clearly states that out of 1,42,369 Hindu students, Brahmin students formed only 30,479. Rest of them, the large chunk, the large majority group was Shudras, and there were 22,794 students who were from the castes that were below the Shudras, which included a number of Dalit, castes. So we have 10,864 Muslim students, and these Muslim students are not from madrasa. These students are studying in Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, indigenous schools. Why the number of Muslim students are less here is mainly because the Muslims formed anywhere between 3 to 5% of the population in Madras Presidency. Now, Monroe proposed the establishment of 300 Tahsildari schools, that is sub-district level, And these are primary schools and 40 secondary schools. He said that 20 secondary schools should teach Persian plus modern curriculum, and 20 should teach modern South Indian languages and modern curriculum. Monroe argued whatever expense the government may incur in the education of the people will be repaid by improvement of the country. There was resistance from the Orientalists. Monroe could establish only 81 Tahsildari and 20 collectorate schools before his death in 1827. In 1827, Monroe's term as governor had ended. He had already sent his wife and son back to England, and he was waiting for his, the another person to come to, hand over the charge. In the meantime, he came to know that cholera had broken out in Rayalaseema. So he went there, though he was no longer technically the governor. He went there to supervise the relief operations there. And he contracted cholera and he died in a tent pitched outside the village Patikonda. And his life in India had begun 47 years before in a tent, and his life also ended in a tent. And people of that area collected 30,000 rupees and wanted to establish a traveler's rest house as a memorial to Monroe. Orientalists opposed and said it would become a shrine to Monroe in the manner of a Hindu shrine. So it was not established. The post-Monroean educational policies, the three governors who succeeded him, Lushington, Frederick Adams, and John Elphinstone, they completely destroyed the kind of administrative system that Monroe had built over a period of 47 years. Monroe and a group of Scottish officers had built. The Orientalist Rawlinson was made in charge of education department. He immediately ordered an inquiry. So this becomes the theme, like whenever they do not want something, they order an inquiry and try to get the result that they want. Same thing happens in North India. I'll just come to that. Out of 40 collectors and sub-collectors, 37 supported Monroe schools. Only 3 supported the Orientalists, who declared that Monroe schools are a failure as there are no pupils from respectable background. That means nobody from upper classes of the society, nobody from rich background. On 18th May 1836, Frederick Adams abolished 101 schools. John Elphinstone, who succeeded Frederick Adams, argued that the light must touch the mountain tops before it could pierce to the levels and depths. This is filtration theory. It is the elites who should get education first. It is the upper classes who should get education first. But then we attribute filtration theory to Macaulay. There was massive protest by Indians. On 11th November 1839, a petition in English was drafted by Ghazalo Lakshminarayan Suchetti, Narayan Swami Naidu, Sri Srinivasa Pillai. All the three of them are non-Brahmins. And signed by 70,000 persons. Even in 21st century, to get 70,000 people to actually sign a petition is impossible. I don't know whether anyone was able to do this kind of, getting signatures, 70,000 persons in the past 10, 15 years. I'm not sure. And they are signed in, Telugu and Tamil languages. And when I came to know about this in Chennai archives, I didn't believe my eyes. Is it possible? This is 18th century. The early part of 18th century we are talking about. Not even the second half, 19th century. It's not even the second part of the 19th century where political movements had taken place. No, 70,000 people. Only when I saw the photograph, then I realized it is true. So they argue in this petition, we are the people of this country, inheriting this land for thousands of generations. From its industry, its wealth is supplied. By our arms, it is defended from foreign foes. By our loyal obedience to the established government, its peace and safety is maintained. If the diffusion of education be among the highest benefits and duties of a government, we the people petition for its share. We seek not education that depends on charity. We shall take pride in contributing according to our means to so noble a cause. And this is the picture of the 70,000 signatures that is there in the British Library. Counter this, Elphinstone wrote an education minute on 12 December 1839. He declared Monroe schools have produced nothing but disappointment. He announced the establishment of Madras University 20 years before the actual establishment. That was essentially to divert the attention of the people. Neither Elphinstone nor his successors established even a single primary school until 1852. For 17 years, Madras Presidency was without any government schools. Everywhere people cherished Monroe's memory. And even in 1870s, they still named their sons as Monroe Lappan. So the kind of, the way the people remembered Monroe. Hundreds of people who studied in the schools, Monroe schools, during 1826 to 1835, went on to establish informal schools throughout the presidency. And we get to know the information. We do not know how many exactly, but then when the Indian political leadership, the Indian social reformers, when they write their biographies, they say that I studied in a school that was maintained by a tailor. I studied in a school, maintained by somebody. So these informal routes of learning English also extensively existed, and I have a research paper on that. Now let us come to North India. This is where A.O. Hume worked. A.O. Hume, Monroe doesn't have a very strong ideological understanding of politics. He only says that this is right, this is wrong. This kind of administration, British administration, is wrong. We have to involve Indians and so on. Whereas Hume is very clear. I have resolved to oppose tooth and nail to the last drop of my blood and the last hour of my life. He said in 1890, when there was opposition from the colonial state, from the senior officials to Indian National Congress, this is what Hume said. Joseph Hume, A.O. Hume's father, was son of a fisherman. He was from Montrose in Scotland. He had worked in North India and he was fluent in Persian and Hindustani. He returned to England in 1808 and he became a member of parliament. He was member of parliament for next 37 years. And he was the one who introduced a number of radical legislation for Britain. Supporting the establishment of trade unions, freedom of press. Even he argued for reduction in the allowance to the royal family, secular education. He also argued for judicial and administrative reforms for India. Joseph Hume in 1831 proposed that 4 Indian members of parliament should be added to the House of Commons, elected by all those Indians eligible for jury service in India. That is, educated Indians should elect 4 members of the, 4 members in the British Parliament. The proposal was, of course, defeated. Hume was born and raised in London. He completely embraced Scottish radicalism. And he wrote, I still cling to the political creed of my father. Like my father before me, I am a radical. Hume's heroes were Muir and Palmer, our Scottish martyrs. This is what he referred to them. Thomas Muir and Thomas Palmer were Scottish political reformers. They were charged with sedition and they were arrested and transported to Australia. Hume defined radicalism as an unselfish and persistent effort to secure the amelioration of a lot of our less fortunate fellows, to raise and comfort the downtrodden and the oppressed and suffering. This is radical creed. At the age of 20, he came to India in 1849 and he became the collector of Etawah district in 1854, and he went on to be collector till 1867. This particular incident is very important for me as a historian. If Hume had not come to Etawah, and if as a historian of education, if I had depended upon the available records there, Henry Stuart Reed, who was an Orientalist, was sent to the 8 districts of Uttar Pradesh, which were under the British administration. Now, the background to that is Macaulay left India in 1838, January 17th, 1838. Immediately, Macaulay's minute was removed and Auckland's education minute was brought into place. Auckland very clearly said that we are not going to fund either the Oriental institutions nor English institutions. And, you know, completely shut down all the schools that Macaulay had established, which were done, subsequently. So the government took a decision to help the indigenous vernacular schools. So there was already data which Monroe had collected. There was data which was collected in Bombay Presidency as well as Bengal Presidency. Only Uttar Pradesh, the northwestern province, data was not available to them. So they sent this Orientalist, H.S. Reed, to collect the data for northwestern province. So this is what H.S. Reed says. The people of India cling with unreflecting reverence to the Bab Dada ka Dastur, with whom custom serves for reason, have always regarded with blind distrust and suspicion every scheme set on foot by the government for their amelioration. People are suspicious of government intentions. In parts of Etawah, people thought that the children in schools would be offered up as propitiatory sacrifice after the completion of Ganga Canal. Educational officers were thought as the emissaries of missionaries. These are very strong words. Unfortunately for H.S. Reed, Hume was posted to Etawah within 2 years. So he was posted in 1854 as a collector. As soon as he took over the charge, he wrote a letter to all the landholders asking them to contribute 1% of the cess for education. This was if a zamindar is, or zamindari was not there, but more of bigger landlords. If they were paying 100 rupees as tax, they had to pay 101 rupees. That is 1% would be used for education. Every zamindar in the district, except one, came for a meeting. They signed the contract, and many of them paid the first installment on the spot. They came with money in their pocket. This shows that how enthusiastic people were and what kind of report H.S. Reed had filed. And others paid within few days. 32 schools were opened in 2 months. Between 1854 to 1857, 181 primary schools and 1 high school was established. When the higher officials opposed it, Hume wrote, "I will put within the reach of every talented lad, however poor, the attainment of first-rate education." All schools had libraries. All school committees had Indian members. All school committees had only Indian members. It was, Hume was only a visiting person. A Muslim in Mayanpuri asked Hume, "Why should our children remain idle a whole day every week because it happens to be a religious festival with you?" This is giving Sunday as a holiday to schools. The people were so enthusiastic about education. And what happened within 2 years? Nothing great happened. The way the Orientalists projected India, the way the Scots opposed it, they contested it. So the schools taught Hindi, Urdu, arithmetic up to compound interest, double rules of 3, and geography. Hume argued further, the foundation of any healthy and comprehensive scheme of education must be laid among the masses. I would devote our chief care, our last energies to sow thickly and widely through the land good elementary schools for the people. The schools had upper caste, OBC, and Dalit children. In few places, there was opposition to the admission of Dalit children. Hume said, no compromise. If you do not admit every child who seeks admission, then I will not support the school. So as a compromise was reached between the school committees and Hume, and separate classrooms were provided for Dalit children. These were only in few schools, not in all schools. Some zamindars were so enthusiastic, they bought textbooks and they read them and they conducted the examination. On May 1st, 1857, 9 days before the outbreak of the revolt of 1857, there were 7,000 students in these schools. The rebel soldiers did not attack these schools. They harmed no hair of any man's head. They only told us, this is what Hume wrote, told us that they could no longer obey us. Next morning, allowed us all to ride quietly off through their lines to Agra. During the revolt, when no British administration existed in Etawah between 10th May 1857 to October 1858, 31 schools functioned without any disruption. People protected school buildings, zamindars paid teachers' salaries, even though when there was no British administration. The remaining schools reopened in July 1858 before the end of revolt in October 1858. During May 1856 to May 1861, the people of Etawah district contributed more than 1,10,000 rupees towards the salaries of schoolmasters and new school buildings. They also contributed 5,500 rupees to repair the Agra College, which was destroyed during the revolt. After the revolt, Hume started an English journal. This was essentially for the students who were passing out of these schools. In English, it was People's Friend, and in Hindi, it was Prajahit, and in Urdu, it is Mohib Iraya. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I'm aware of that. So you read it. So, and it was a fortnightly with 31,000 circulation. Late 1861, Hume left for England on medical leave. He had not taken any leave in the previous 11 years. He left for England. By this time, H.S. Reed, who had filed that report on Etawah, had become Director of Public Instruction. Immediately, Hume left in November 1861. Immediately, the inquiry was ordered to all, Hume schools. Kempson, Inspector of Schools, and Pollock, officiating collector of Etawah, conducted the inquiry during the foggy winter January 1862. And they found only 50% of children in school, and they called it fraud, And students had studied arithmetic up to compound interest and double rules of three, but they were examined in cube root in decimals. Obviously, all students failed because that had not been, taught. Hume schools were declared as failure, most inefficient and disorganized. The education department took over the schools. Because they were inefficient and disorganized, the education department started shutting them down one by one. People protested. They wrote to Hume in England. Hume again wrote to Charles Wood. Charles Wood did not support Hume. He supported H.S. Reed. Reed, who had 11 years earlier declared that the educational officers were thought as emissaries of missionaries, handed over the one room in Central English School to a missionary for scriptural classes on Sunday. Kempson, Inspector of Schools, imposed restrictions on the circulation of Hume's journals. In 1863, Lakshman Singh, who edited Hindi edition, was transferred to Bulandshahr. In 1864, Jawaharlal, the editor and owner of the press, he was also the editor of Urdu, version of the journal, was forced to relocate to Agra. Hume returned in January 1863. He refused promotion, stayed on till 1867 to revive the schools, but he could not because they had already been shut down, and it was very, very ruthless way of doing things. When they shut down Monroe schools, they just stopped giving salaries to teachers. So many a time the schools were taken over by the local, population, and they gave salaries to the teachers. Schools continued, but here they sold the school buildings, and they completely destroyed it so that no school can be revived. Only Etawah Central School survived. Hume was transferred out finally in 1867, and he had a saving of 7,200 rupees, which he handed it over to Etawah Central School. And the collector, as a collector of Etawah, was the first and last post he held that directly dealt with the people. Government was aware of his popularity among Indians, so it kept him isolated from public. He was made Commissioner of Customs for Northwestern Province, where he abolished 2,500 miles long customs barrier. He was later transferred to, he was posted as a Secretary of Agriculture. He wrote on agrarian distress and supported radical legislation of Deccan Agricultural Relief Act, agricultural banks, and the government shut down the agricultural department. The influential British officers considered him as a traitor, called on the government to deport Hume for insubordination. Finally, Hume retired from service in 1882. Hume realized that scattered individuals, however capable, however well-meaning or powerless, what is needed is an organization. And that organization should, the constitution of the proposed organization should be democratic, free from personal ambitions, to promote mental, moral, social, and political regeneration of the people of India. On 1st March 1883, he wrote an open letter to the graduates of Calcutta University, called upon these young men to build a strong Indian nation. And it resonated not just among the graduates of Calcutta University, but across India. So as a result, Indian National Congress was established in 1885 by, people from every walks of life and every corner of India. Hume was aware of the fact that the British elites, would project this development negatively in the British press. So he wrote to them directly, to the leading journals and newspapers, in advance about the proposed organization. He also contacted the British radicals and liberals like Charles Bradlaugh and William Digby and others. And then, finally, along with Dadabhai Navroji and W.C. Banerjee, set up on 27 July 1889 the British Committee of the Indian National Congress in London. Hume and fellow Scot William Wedderburn spent thousands of pounds of their pension funds in campaigns on behalf of Indian National Congress in Britain. Hume left India in 1894 due to ill health. Before leaving India, he asked Indians to promise him two things. One, to remove child marriage, and second, educate every boy and girl in the country. And his final parting words were, I have spent 45 years of my life in India. India has become part of me, my thought, my hopes. I have lived my life amongst you. The welfare of the nation is the highest law. India should grow great and glorious, that her people should become free and happy. Farewell, dear friends, farewell. I have not succeeded in securing for you any appreciable fraction of what I hope to win for you. The land I have loved will surely someday win all that I have hoped for her. Thank you.